Tom, there's a lot of stuff to cover in here. I want to start with the one you said we should get to. You wanted to talk about this. So Northvolt, the battery plant, we thought this was a done deal. I guess the news now is not so fast. What's going on?
There's a really super high caliber group of lawyers called the Quebec Environmental Task Force. I mean, I'm sort of making up an English name. It's Centre Québécois de droit à l'environnement. So Quebec Center for Environmental Law might be another way to put it. They're really top notch. They've taken a legal case to try to block the Northvolt factory. Of course, it's going to take a lot of high caliber environmental lawyers, and they've got most of them. And it's going to take a very courageous judge, and we'll see where this case winds up. So this is a huge piece of property, as we all recall, that was purchased. A guy who had purchased it to do residential building for $22 million was able to sell it as part of this whole deal that was being put together with tons of public money and private money. The guy did pretty well. He sold it for pretty close to $250 million just a few years later, so that they could have a place, because it takes a huge place to build this type of huge factory. So they've already said, well, we're going to cut, so many thousands of trees. And the people who are looking at this saying they're already into precious wetlands. These are wetlands that house, that provide a habitat for some pretty endangered species, or at least some that are in difficulty. They want all this to be looked at by a judge. It's a gutsy move. I'm not sure we're going to find, the ability, in the current state of things, to find somebody who's going to say, you know what, you're right. But they've gone around the environmental rules with this massive factory already. They had them changed prospectively before the thing was even announced. So there was one norm that required a production above 50,000 to trigger a full review by the Environmental Hearing Board, what we call the BAP. And they changed the rule. They said, it's 60,000 for this factory, after this factory. So this is what we call regulatory capture. When somebody is in an industry that's supposed to be regulated in the public interest, all of a sudden they have the ear and apparently the handwriting hand of the government, and they get to write rules, or have them written for them, that simply change the rules or allow them to skirt them. So this is, I think, very refreshing for people who believe in protecting biodiversity, habitat, the environment, people who say this is a great opportunity for the government to spend billions and billions of dollars of taxpayers' money and giving it to a private corporation so that maybe they can come up with a factory that won't be obsolete the minute it opens because somebody's come up with a completely different technology to make batteries. But I digress.
Yeah.
Good move, and it's important that people know that there are groups like that out there.
All right. Okay. Good move or not, I'm not so sure. Pierre Poilievre taking to X today to call out the mayors of Quebec City and Montreal, basically saying that they are incompetent due to the lack of housing here. I mean, let me just quickly read what was written here without going into great detail. Massive drop in construction in Quebec while Trudeau pays billions to incompetent mayors Marchand and Plante who block construction site. And then he says federal money for cities will be linked to the number of houses and apartments built when I am Prime Minister.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, that Quebec expression, I'm sure you've heard it before, quand on crache en l'air. When you spit in the air, you're never sure where it's going to land.
Might come right back at you.
Yep, and Pierre Poilievre spit right into a gale force wind. This just in, Pierre, and I've said this actually since he started his leadership race. I've been repeating this, that in Quebec there is a law. It's called the Executive Council Act, that forbids municipalities from dealing with the federal government. So when Poilievre says that Trudeau has paid billions to these incompetent mayors, it is a complete and utter falsehood. It is not true. Because Trudeau is not allowed. He's allowed to deal. He's allowed across Canada. He'll deal with London, Ontario. He'll deal with, he'll deal with Calgary. He's allowed to deal with cities. But in the province of Quebec, years ago, the province said, no. We've got the authority here. We create municipalities. The municipalities hate it when, PQ ministers used to love saying, no. Municipalities, including Montreal, they're just creatures of the legislature. Even though it's an inelegant way to say it, it's true. So Poilievre is 100% wrong here. And what's interesting is that, I try to tell this to people. Poilievre, look at him in the polls. He might be way ahead. This is the guy, always bending and stretching the truth and coming up with a great line on Twitter, X, but happens to be not true. So he's going to get called on this stuff. He did it during his convention. He always, look at how long it takes to approve a mining project. We're going to approve them. The 1982 Constitution stipulates clearly that it's the provinces that are responsible for natural resources, not the feds. you don't get to approve anything. So he's not going to get to go to, these are real cases, to Sept-Îles for an apatite. This is the mine that they wanted to build there, right on the edge of the St. Lawrence. And they're not going to tell Quebecers, oh, after all, we're going to be mining for uranium in Quebec, because Quebecers and BAP, this public hearing board I just mentioned before, have already said, we're not going down the uranium road in Quebec. So he's got no authority, no jurisdiction, unless he wants to have, of course, a permanent fight with the province of Quebec, in which case, well, people are well advised to learn about that before the next election.
Does it even matter, though, really, Tom? Because he's still, to his base, this is gold, right? And the mayor snapped back. The mayor's like, no, this is not how this works. You're totally wrong. But I feel like there's still worth to this for him.
I'm not sure this is to his base at all. You're talking about in Quebec. His base is not in here. How many people, I mean, let's remember back, and I know he wasn't the candidate at the time or leader of the party. Remember, Premier Legault came out and said, next federal election, Conservative, maybe consider parking your vote. Why would you do something like this and slap them in the No, this is local. This is Montreal and Quebec City taking a shot at the mayors. Where's the advantage to that? I don't understand.
There is none. There's none. This is pure Poilievre. This is Poilievre being Poilievre's worst enemy. And you can be sure that, the senior, older, more seasoned types around him, people like John Baird, who are close to him, are pulling out their hair right now. So, okay, why pick a useless fight? The guy who brought me into politics was named Claude Ryan. Wonderful human being.
Yeah.
And one day I remember I was, ready to get angry about something, and he goes, Tom, listen, Mr. Mulcair, en politique, we always add, we never subtract in politics. You're always looking to add the next person. Why pick a fight? So everything that comes out of Poilievre's mouth has gone through not an analysis by lawyers or people who care about public administration. It's gone through a focus group. Will you be more likely to vote for Poilievre if you scream at Valérie Plante? Well, how many people didn't vote for Valérie Plante? How many of them will be likely to vote for me if I say she's an incompetent? Same thing with Bruno Marchand in Quebec City. Valérie Plante's got a pretty big fan base here in Montreal. Marchand is really, really liked in Quebec City, and that's where Poilievre wants to win a bunch of seats. He's saying what the trash radio stations in Quebec City want to hear. He's trashing their mayor. I'm not sure it's going to work. When you watch what happened to Legault, this type of trash talk is not working in Quebec City. And I think that it's a monumental mistake constitutionally, but it's an even bigger mistake, as Aaron just suggested, in terms of what it's actually going to produce. It's incredibly stupid.
Tom Mulcair, he is back tomorrow morning with Andrew Carter at 7:40 a.m. Tom, thank you so much.
Talk to you soon.
You bet.